morning to everybody in TV land. This is Mike Hittner with Historic Point Basse Update. Today with me on my right is Tom Bremer. Welcome, Tom. And I'd like to thank Don Matthews for filling in when Tom was absent. He was up at his cottage up north for several months, and so we had the privilege of having Don with us, so that was a lot of fun. We're going to talk about, 3 or 4 things today, actually. We're going to have a little review of Spirit Walk, which was October 21st and 28th, from 6 o'clock to 8:30 p.m. Tom, your impression, we both were interpreting this time, and we were ghosts, or whatever, as they say, on our interpretation and our walk around. And previously, maybe Tom would do it one year and I'd be a guide, and vice versa. But this year we're both doing it again. So, Tom, from your interpretation, from your vantage point.
I thought it was really good. There was a good group of people. We had 13 groups go out each week. Not quite 400 people. That's a lot of people.
Yes.
And doing a presentation 13 times a week, 13 times in 2.5 hours is that's enough.
Yeah.
But it was really enjoyable. The people were very cooperative. I don't know of anything that went amok. So I thought it went well, and we heard some good comments. Mm-hmm. So it seems to be growing each year, so I think it's a good deal.
Yeah, and it was kind of nice too. Some years, as being a spirit, we've had flashlights shined on us or something. I didn't notice any of that. I think they were prepped good by the guides before they left and everything, and so they handled that very well. Just information for our public out there, that next year we've decided, Historic Point Basse, to go from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So we're going to add a half an hour on the tail end just to, we have some groups that come around 8:15, 8:30, and then if we're too busy and it's going to take a while before those people can go out, then they either get delayed or maybe they decide, well, I'm going to go home because it's going to get too late because they have maybe children or something like that, smaller children. So we're going to extend it a half an hour, and so that should help us to get maybe 2 more groups out of that possibly, and so on. Our max has been pretty much 13 or 14. Maybe we can get 15 or 16 groups. But it was a great success. The weather was unbelievably warm on the 21st. I think we went from 72 on the October 21st, the first Saturday. October 28th, I think, was like 32. I think we had 40-degree difference between those 2 days. Actually, I think I preferred the 32. The 72 was almost too warm, and we have to wear a certain amount of clothes. I don't have a vest on today because I forgot it, but we wear a vest and a jacket or a poncho or something like that, and it ends up getting too warm when it's 72 degrees because that's just not what we normally wear. But we'd like to thank everybody that came out for Spirit Walk. It was a great time, and as spirits, we enjoyed as much as the public does. One of our maybe issues that we have as spirits is we don't get to see everybody else's presentation, but from what we heard, and I heard a couple of them and saw a couple of the other ones, that people that did it was very well done. Between Tom and I, with Tom with his singing and me with my yelling, I think probably heard me. You didn't have to be there to hear me, so it spread out around the site. So we'd like to thank all those participants and our guides, our tail guides, the people that sold tickets, storytellers, people that did the cider and all that sort of thing. All those people that made it possible. It was a great success, and we'd like to thank you for that. Now we'd like to go on something we had just in between this, is we had a MOMCC conference, a Midwest Outdoor Museum Coordinating Committee or whatever, and we go to this each year. 7 of us went this year. I think last year we had maybe 8 go, but it's a lot of fun because it's people in the same outdoor type museums that we have, living history centers, and we get together, we share ideas, we have workshops, we have seminars where we go to learn a little bit more. So it's very, very enjoyable for us. And this just happened on the 9th, 10th, and 11th of November. So we're just freshly back from that. So it was a good time. Tom, you went to one workshop. Maybe tell a little bit about your workshop, leaning on a horse or a horse leaning on you.
Yeah, I made a new friend. Max is a really, really gentle 2,000-pound horse,
Wow.
about 15 hands high at the withers. And I was grooming him in a stall, not his stall. He wanted to be in his stall, which was just next door. So he kind of leaned over so he could get close.
Yeah. My understanding was that the party that was the presenter there separated him a little bit so he could stand in Max's stall to converse and watch with each of you doing what you did.
As we did. And Max didn't think that was the greatest idea. So Max tried to lean over. And boy, that gets thin in there for a while. But he was good. I pushed him over, got out, and then we put him in his own stall, and life was really good. Then he was just his beautiful self. They're big white percherons.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness, what a huge animal.
Yeah, about a ton?
Just about a ton, a little over.
Yeah.
They had they were brothers.
Mm-hmm.
They'd been together as a team for like 15 years.
Wow.
And we did not get to work them. This was very basic.
It was mostly harnessing.
And care.
Yeah.
And the general, how a horse thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't do horses. We sometimes have horses at Point Basse, but not too often. But it's the kind of to fill in the general knowledge that someone, even my character, would have had at that time.
Sure.
So it's kind of like background stuff.
Yeah.
And who knows, someday we might have one down there and I might get to play with him a little.
Yeah.
So
Now, I know in previous conferences you've had an affinity towards like either oxen or horses or something like that, or in some cases butchering or whatever.
Yep.
But how does an oxen and a horse compare? I mean, as far as the farmers using it and where they use them and how they work?
Oxen are slower but stronger, actually. Now, I don't know, that's a huge horse, so but the average, they're slower, but and I think a little more docile. If I had to choose, I would work with the oxen. Once they're trained, or even when they're little, to train them, I think would be.
Why don't you go through a little bit, Tom? I never realized, and we were talking on the way back, of how early they start training those oxen.
2 weeks old.
2 weeks old.
Yeah, they get them and they start leading them, so they learn to walk with a halter, and then they start with voice command. When you want to walk forward, you say get up, and you touch them, we just touch them on their backside with usually they call it a goad, but it's just a stick. And you just touch it, and between the voice and the touch, then they go forward. And then G is to the right, Haw is to the left.
Similar to horses.
Exactly. And whoa and back up. There's only 5 commands that they really know. You can get sooner or later that they can step sideways if you need them, or other things, but they're fun to work with. I worked with the oxen at Old World one time, and that was on a carts and wagons. And then a year ago we did plowing. No, last spring it was. We did plowing with one. It was a yoke, and that's a lot more work.
Which one did you go through the fence almost with?
The first one at Old World. I didn't almost go through the fence. I took down the fence. I caught the wheel. I turned too sharply. When you say haw, they'll go.
Right.
They don't know that the fence is in the way.
Well, and I think in a certain regard, I can see this as none of us do this on a regular basis.
No.
That when you do this for an afternoon or a whole day session, you might get a little excited and don't say the right command or quick enough or something, you kind of freeze or something, and then all of a sudden, or too quick.
Yeah.
Because if they're going to stop or they're going to turn, they're going to do it like that.
Right.
So.
And if you give them the wrong command when they're well trained,
yes,
they'll just stand there and look at you because they don't understand. And if they don't understand, they don't move. And horses are a little more skittish. They have a different. It was very interesting when we first got there. They talked about how the horse perceives things. They can see over 300 degrees in a circle.
Wow.
Their eyes are on the now. It's very peripheral, but if there's movement out there, they can see it. Only a spot as wide as their tail that they can't see something.
Is that why they sometimes put blinders on them?
Right, exactly.
To keep that vision maybe just like 100 degrees or something like that?
Yeah. They only see, their binocular vision is 22 degrees in the front, where you get both eyes. So then the rest of that's kind of peripheral vision, and they put the blinders on, and you would think it would make them more nervous. They can't see. But if they don't see it, it doesn't bother them. It isn't there. So that's why the blinders. And that's one thing I never quite understood. We either was the blind. I mean, I knew what they were for, but I never realized the extent. And then you kind of get the the right brain, left brain kind of reactive. Because a horse, if you teach him something on the right side, you must go around and teach him that same thing from the left side.
Oh.
And Nate, the fella that's the resident farm manager there where we were, he said you can drive a horse out past something and it's on his left side, doesn't react a bit. You come back 20 minutes later, nothing has changed, and that'll spook him because he had not perceived it with his right side. When you come back the same road, and he might react and shy away from it. He says you've got to keep thinking all the time whenever you're training them that right and left. And after a while, when they get really used to you and to them, then it's different. But he says when you first start, you got to be really careful.
I could see how a workshop like this gives you some insights, but it's no way are you going to be ready to go out with them.
God, no. No, if nothing else, it teaches you all you don't know.
Yeah.
But it does give you a little background so that when you're talking to people and being your character, you've got the same background knowledge that, at least some of it, that your character would have had 150 years ago.
Yeah. I've done some reading also on the horses versus oxen. In different places they've had one versus the other, but the horse folks, if you didn't know, it takes a much more better diet, you might say. They have to have oats, they have to have like Timothy or alfalfa hay, and where oxen can just eat whatever is around. I mean, they really don't have a specific diet, so that probably divided out. Maybe the owner of the horses were a little more wealthy or something, or came from an area where they had used horses before, because oxen are probably going to live as long as horses and probably do more work and they get tired less. And diet is, if you got to raise these crops for these horses, the specialized diet is going to be much more expensive for them. So, and we were at, actually, I forgot to mention, we were at Sauter Village in Archbold, Ohio, just across the Ohio border from Indiana, about 7.5, 8 hours from Wisconsin Rapids area. And about, I think probably 500 miles is what it was.
Yeah.
And I took a flax class. They had two parts of it. It was done by husband and wife team from Illinois, and very informative. I took the part on the flax, and they talked the difference between the edible flax and the line flax. The line flax is the one I went to because that's for growing fiber, and there's two different varieties. And I didn't realize, but I know flax is an early fiber that was one of the first clothing type things that was used, but it goes back 30,000 years. They found samples in the country of Georgia, which is in north of the Middle East, up there below Russia, 30,000 years samples of flax-made fabric. So that is probably the most ancient fabric. Also, it's a very strong fabric. I didn't realize that hemp is probably stronger because it's a little longer strand or piece of fabric that they make. And so, but of course hemp grows 6-7 feet tall, and this flax is basically about 36 inches tall. It doesn't grow real tall. And the only thing stronger than those is spider web and silk, because there's no joint in those. It could have like a mile of thread out of a spider web. One spider web could have a mile of thread in it, and it has no joints in it. And so that was very informative to know that. Also that a shirt, they used to grow flax. They grew 1/4 acre for each person in the house because that would make some clothing for them. It takes 6,000 feet of flax thread to make one man's shirt. So you can see it's a lot of stuff. And this isn't like 400 threads per inch or anything, not a real fine or high quality. It's probably something more like 100 or 100 threads per inch, more of a coarser flax. Tom and I both have flax shirts, and
Got one on.
He's got one on, and this one's probably 25 years old.
Well, it's a good 20 years old.
20 years old. And
it's starting to wear. Of course, with my character, the more it wears, the better I like it.
Yes. And as Tom knows, and I know, when you first get them, they're kind of coarse and
really heavy. This has been laundered enough, so it's kind of thinned out a little, but they last. I mean, I can see a long life.
The interesting thing about the flax is that once you dry it out, and now, first of all, when you cut it, you pull it out. You don't cut it, because you want the longest strands you can get. So you pull it out of the ground, and then it's conditioned, or whatever you want to say, in water. Now, in those days, they did them in ponds. In fact, they talked about, they made rules in New England around Boston area, because people did the flax in the ponds. Well, you can imagine the stench, because it has to kind of somewhat halfway decompose to break that outside fiber down on the flax, so you can get at that more of that line or that thread that's inside there. So they do it in a pond. You can do it in a river. It takes about 10 days to 2 weeks in a pond. In a river, it's going to take longer, because you got water circulating all the time. And what they did it in, for their purposes, where they buy an inflatable swimming pool like 5 foot in diameter, and they put it in there. And then they check it after the first 4 or 5 days. They check it every day, because when this is ready, it's ready. And there's a certain point where if it goes too long, then that fiber can be destroyed. And then once you get it out of there, you take it out and you dry it. And it takes 4 or 5 days, depending on the weather, that sort of thing. And then then they have what they call a flax breaker. It's kind of like a paper cutter, but it's made all out of wood, and it's a bigger, 3 foot, 4 foot long, and they break that flax. What you're doing is breaking, after it's been conditioned and everything, you're breaking that outer shell of that flax that holds that thread inside. And once that breaks, you can pull these strands out of there, and then they have a knife. They take a wooden knife and a board that kind of slants, and then you hit on there, breaking off this outside hull and everything, and then you do the combing. And they got different types of combs, and they're like nails coming through a board, finer or coarser. Now, they were talking about the royalties' clothing in France. They'd have 30 combs they'd pull it through to get it finer, because the royalty wanted really fine linen, you can imagine, and they could afford it or had the people to do it, whichever way it was. But for the average person, they'd probably have 3 combs, and they'd take it from coarse to medium to finer, and they would pull it through there. And then they get this long fiber. It's 6 to 12 inches long, and then they would use a carding, almost like they would with wool. They would card it a little finer, and then they would take it from that point and start spinning it. They'd take it off a distaff, and they'd bring it down, and they'd pull it, and they'd have the wheel going around, and they'd collect this thread. So it was very interesting. I didn't take the second half of the class, because I didn't think I'd ever do it, was spinning it. No. Doesn't mean a man can't spin. It's probably just I'm not going to spin. So for me to take the second half, there's 2. We had 6 in our class, and 2 took the spinning in the afternoon, and 4 of us just took the original first part. But very, very informative. Our master gardeners are going to grow a little flax down at the site, either in the garden or in another spot, or maybe at one of their members' places. I would think, since it has to be weeded for the first foot of height of it, you'd probably do I would think about a 4 foot wide by 20 foot, and then you could weed from both sides. And that way it would be easy to weed. Once it gets above a foot, then you don't weed it anymore. And it grows fairly well in this climate. About $13 a pound if you buy the seed, between $13 and $20 a pound if you buy the seed. I think Landis, I bought some years ago, and it was from Landis, I think in Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. They specialize in it, but we're going to try it, and we're going to demonstrate some of that down at the site in this next year, or maybe after the harvest. Might be the next year after that. But it's a kind of a fun thing, and something they would have done. I mean, flax was readily available. I mean, cotton, until they started growing cotton in the United States, southern United States, in maybe 1820s, 30s, and then it grew from there, probably wasn't available. Interesting thing too is, in the trade in the Middle East, with Egypt and all that, and the Phoenicians were the big traders. all of their sails were made out of flax. When we don't call it linen until it's put into the thread point. You always call it flax all the way through until it's put until they spin it. Then it's called linen. Otherwise, but their sails were made all of linen, because difference between linen and cotton is when linen gets wet, it gets stronger. Cotton gets weaker. So that was the great thing about linen for them. And they used it in armor. They made different layers of it in the 1,000 years ago, used it for armor, because from perspiration and getting wet and everything, they had about 6 or 8 layers. A spear couldn't even penetrate that stuff. They'd get a bruise out of it, but it wouldn't cut the flesh. So, I mean, there you go.
When I first had this shirt, we played town ball out at the Wakely site, and oh my goodness, it was hot.
It was a day about 90 degrees.
And I don't know what this this shirt was a lot thicker in those days because it hadn't been laundered probably only once. But when we came back, you drop it on the wood floor and it go thud.
Yeah.
It was, but you can see where the flax would swell up. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and also for men's coats or women's coats, lining them was a lot of times done with flax or linen, because it felt easier on the skin, and it kept the wool away from the inside, and so it wasn't itchy, and it also absorbed perspiration. So I think it was one of those things that they did. When Tom just talked about laundering, if you're never supposed to bleach linen, what you're supposed to do historically is they use cow dung and something else, and it sounds kind of weird, but that's what they use. Because I think the bleach destroys a certain element of the fabric is what it does. So that's why they don't do
used to, the word bleachers that we think of where we sit and watch football games, they were racks built like that, and they would face them towards the sun. And they would, in the Mediterranean, they would take their laundry and or when it's just freshly woven cloth, and then they would sit it out in the sun and bleach it, but not chemically, but just from the rays of the sun would help to make it whiter. That's where we get the word bleacher seats from, is the slant.
The sun would do it.
Right.
The sun would do it. So it was a great conference. Some of our other members took broom making classes. If you get
glass
to
blowing.
If you get to the 3-bay shed, you'll see a bucket, a stave bucket that was made by a couple of our members. And in fact, it's got, if you look on the bottom, ask them to, and you can see their signatures of all the people in the class. They were going to make each a bucket, but there was no way they'd totally get done. So they made 2 varieties of buckets, and then they put them on the auction at Momsey has an auction on the Friday night dinner sort of thing, and we got one of the buckets, and the other one was gotten by another party, but that bucket will be used around the house in the 3-bay shed, around the site, so you get to see it. It's got a rope handle on it, of course, and that sort of thing, but we're real proud of our members that worked on that. It's quite a process, and they got kind of enthused about the bucket making.
I don't think that'll be the only bucket you'll see there. I have a feeling that there'll be more buckets made in the relatively near future.
Yeah, so that was a great conference, and we learn a lot always. In the spring, it's in Shakopee, Minnesota, at Murphy's Landing, or whatever they call it now, but it's called originally Murphy's Landing. The Landing now. But that'll be fun, and then we got one in Dearborn, Michigan the following fall, and then there's one in Illinois after that. So very good, and certainly anybody that would like to go to those sort of things, you wouldn't have to be a member of us, but we'd encourage. It's MOMCC, and it's a great organization to belong to. Lots of good information, and the camaraderie is almost worth it alone without anything else going to these.
And you learn you're not the only one that sometimes, you're working at anything, right, but as a volunteer at a historic site, sometimes it's like why am I working so hard? What am I accomplishing? Right. Well, when you realize that you are accomplishing education with all the kids, and you're not the only one, they all, like you say, camaraderie, they all feel the same, and we can get together and say, wait a minute, we're not weird. We're really okay, and we're really doing something that's important.
Yeah, what's kind of interesting, and I enjoy a lot, that we got everybody there from Dearborn Village, Henry Ford's museum.
Good Lord, yes.
28 million objects they have, they've got assessed. You go all the way to us, one of the smallest organizations, and probably less than 1,000 objects. We're going through the process right now of assessing what objects are in our buildings and what we have in storage and stuff like that. So we're going from 28 million to less than 1,000. So gives you the whole spectrum of the people that are there. But they're all just as down to earth as anybody.
Oh.
So it's a great time.
The lady that is now at Greenfield Village, there, she's a PhD, was a professor in teaching museum management, has now retired from teaching and is now working at the Henry Ford.
Yeah.
But the nicest, most down-to-earth, willing to work with anybody person you've ever met. And it's like, wait a minute, she's got more letters after her name than she has in her name.
Right.
And learning to drive horses. And she's going, well, at Henry Ford, we've got, 8 or 10 teams of horses that they use on their shuttle service around the village and that. She says, we're not open at that time. She says, I think we can just comes up with this, maybe we can put on a class for that. And it's like, really, that would be so cool.
Yeah.
And at a museum of that size, my goodness.
Yeah. So it was interesting, great time. I think we all learned a lot. Next thing we want to talk about is we got 2 Christmas parades we're in. Historic Point Basse, look for our float. We're in the Wisconsin Rapids one. It's about 5 p.m. on November 22nd, the Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. So it's kind of the kickoff of the holiday season in Wisconsin Rapids, and they have a great parade, and we're proud to be a part of that. And it'll run probably from the mall area to over by the Meat Inn or something in that area. So it runs basically through the downtown area. And then on December 2nd, which is a Saturday in Nakusa, we're in the Nakusa Holiday Parade, and we have been in that a number of times off and on over the years, and we're proud to be in the Nakusa Parade again on December 2nd, about 5 o'clock p.m. for that one also. And that runs, I think, from the library to the old Alexander School or something like that.
Yeah.
It runs through the downtown area in any way. So I think that'll be a great one to watch for. We'll be handing out some brochures, probably some candy, some brochures that list our events for this year. We got one more event which we're going to shortly talk about, and then all of next year. So you get a kind of a nice brochure that you can put on the refrigerator or something like that and save, because it'll have everything on there for you. And we invite you, of course, to all of our events. Our next event, it's a good segue, is our Heritage Holiday. It's on December 16th. It's a Saturday, kind of almost like before Christmas. I think Christmas is on like a Monday or something like that.
It's
and so this
10
is
days before.
this is one of our great events. Last year we had a snow out. We didn't have a lot of people, but they're trying to get out of their own houses. But we go rain, shine, or snow, no matter what. And December 16th, that's a Saturday from 1 to 5 p.m. Now, it's what I look at it, and I think Tom and I have talked about it, it's kind of we got Black Friday coming up. We're excited about shopping. We're excited about Christmas and all kinds of activities going on. But now it's time to kind of step back and what the real basics are and that sort of thing. And so I think that'll be kind of fun. We usually have good food and beverages available. I know we got hot chocolate, and then the kids do s'mores and that sort of thing. We have a little fire in front of the 3-bay shed. We do that. People will be demonstrating in the 3-bay shed. You can talk to the bucket guys. They'll probably be there. They got one of their bucket lists done. They did the bucket. So the schoolhouse will be open, and the Master Gardener ladies will be doing a project, and there'll be the school interpreted and that sort of thing. And we'll have the house is open. They're going to have some great things going on, some projects, and they're also going to have some great food. Some what they years ago called puddings, but are more likely what we would call cake, huh?
It's a boiled cake, which sounds strange to us, but if you learn about the way they used to cook, they didn't always have frying pans or ovens, so boiling things in water. Sometimes they would make soup and then boil the bread portion of the meal in the soup as it's cooking. So you do 2 in 1 kettle.
Okay.
And it started, the Scottish haggis is actually the beginning of pudding. Now we're talking way back. And by the 1700s, it got to be more like we think of, with flour and cream and eggs and raisins. The plum pudding, they don't really use plums, but anyway. It's going to be interesting and really fun. I've never had a boiled pudding. I'm really looking forward to it. You can bake that also.
I would almost think it's heavier, Tom.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
a
There's no leavening at all.
like a fruitcake or something.
Oh yeah, even more than, because
Heavier
there's at
than
least some baking powder, baking soda in a fruitcake.
Okay.
So there's no leavening at all. I mean, it's solid, but it's certainly good food, and it's I was watching a video. The guy said that while this is not really, really sweet, the way we think of it,
Right.
in those days, they consumed far less sugar than we do. So this was probably the sweetest thing they had all year long, and you would make it like at Christmas time. So it's from the old English traditions.
Yeah, I think I read something back historically where people in the Wakely's era, if the per capita consumption of sugar or honey or whatever their sweets were, maple syrup, that sort of thing, was maybe in the range of 2 to 5 pounds a year, where the average American now consumes like 140, 150 pounds a year. So you can see the perspective of how something would be sweet, but not too sweet, but also gives you a perspective of the whole thing.
And they didn't do it very often either.
Right.
That's,
It was,
I think, the big thing.
It was less often. So you were doing anything special, Tom, in the cabin?
We're going to be roasting some hazelnuts. They always talk about chestnuts roasting. They don't grow here.
Yes.
So we've gone to doing roasted hazelnuts, which you can crack and eat while you're there. We'll be talking about Christmas traditions. We're going to be roasting a duck or a goose or a ham. I don't know yet.
I've seen a lot of geese along in the parks along the way.
No, no, thank you. That'd be too big.
Yeah.
But we'll be preparing our Christmas dinner to invite some of the neighbors to the cabin to help us celebrate. So we're going to be roasting, and then, like I say, the nuts and that we'll have there.
And I don't think today, modern-wise, we realize how big Christmas or get-togethers were in those days, because there weren't a lot of early settlers here and pioneers or in the Voyageurs era. There weren't a lot of people, so Tom might be working for one fur company, and they might invite their competitors over for a meal or something during a holiday.
They were deadly enemies in business.
Yes.
I mean, they did all kinds of things that are not really very nice, but at that one time, they would then put that aside for a day or so, and sometimes one would host Christmas, the next one would host New Year's. And sometimes New Year's was actually more of a celebration than Christmas was, because it's not as a religious holiday, so it's
Just
more
a
of a
celebration.
party time, a reason to get together. But even in the Wakely's time, I mean, boy, you get a chance to go visit the neighbors and talk to people, and jeepers,
It's kind of like when we do our winter feast in February, the newspaper recordings of it, the cotillion where people got together and they stayed overnight and they had a great time, and they talk about it in the newspaper and all those. We just can't imagine that so few people, when they did get together, they really had a grand time. Plus, in the middle of winter or after the harvest is done, they've got plenty of time now. They don't have to worry about, well, we got to get these crops harvested, we got to shell the corn, or we got to whatever we have to do. Now we have some spare time. We can do some other things. I think I like to point, Basse, at the Heritage Holiday is each building is decorated differently. First of all, there wasn't a lot of decoration in the Wakely's day, and none in
Virtually none
in your era. Tom was a little like 50 years ahead of us. But you'll see, the schoolhouse will probably be decorated the most traditionally as we think of Christmas, a tree and, different other things. And way they've decorated like we think of today, because that's interpreted about 1925. Now, when we move over to the house, interpreted 1840, 1860, they're going to have a little bit of that, but very much less, and it's going to be much more subdued. And so you're going to have some celebration, but it's more in what we're doing and what we're eating and that sort of thing, and the food and beverages and that sort of thing. So, that's kind of nice to see that perspective, because we go from our own homes today, it's a big decoration day. Of how we decorate our homes, and our outside of our homes, people put the lights on the trees and all that, and then we go to the schoolhouse, and we go to the house, and then we go finally to the cabin. It's going to be a whole different perspective there, and you're going to see basically nothing other than a little bit of celebration, but no ornamentation or anything like that. And this year we've got one of our interpreters will be in the bunkhouse, which will be kind of nice. He's going to be like a pioneer from Sweden or something like that, and he's going to be talking about all the things he brought with him and what he's doing and that sort of thing.
Kind of a traveler.
A traveler sort of thing. So that'll be kind of interesting too. And it's we got the heat in the house, of course. The cabin's got heat. The bunkhouse has heat, and the school has heat. The rest of the places, well, of course, it's December 16th. Dress appropriately, of course. Yes. We invite you to our Heritage Holiday, December 16th, from 1 to 5 p.m. Adults $3, children $2, and a student or child is anybody from first grade through college. So it's very reasonable. Come out and bring the whole family, grandparents, and everybody. It's a good time to kind of relax.
And it's at a fun time of the day. I enjoy the evenings at Point Basse as much as anything, because it's kind of that real, especially
twilight,
if it's a
almost
nice sunny day, you get that long twilight at the end of the day. And it is so cool. If we could only get a little snow, not too much.
Yes.
Not like last year.
Yeah.
With a little bit of snow, and then that evening coming on, and then by 5 o'clock when it's dark, okay, time to go home. We don't need to be falling around in the snow.
1 to 5 o'clock, because basically that evening starts, like Tom was talking here about, from about 3:30, 3:45 on. We've got about an hour and a half of this gradual twilight, and you can see the sun setting on the river if the sun happens to be out, and it's a beautiful time to be out. So we invite you, and thanks, Tom, for being here with us today, and like to have you here. Historic Point Basse is going to have this winter feast in February. Yes. I think, what is it, February 17th. And
or is it?
And
Now
Tom,
you got me. It's the Saturday, 16th or 17th.
Yeah, I think it's 16th.
Okay.
And Tom just made arrangements with music.
Yep.
And we got some great period music, actually.
Folks are coming up from, I think it's Westby, in that general area. They do period music, maybe even just a little before Wakely's time, but not much.
Right.
And there's as many as 8 musicians. And we will have some period dancing, the contra dancing kind of thing, that you can participate in or not if you don't care to. We're going to have a real good dinner.
Has some food started coming in?
We have some venison that's been donated. We've got some vegetables and things.
I saw a bunch of tomatoes.
Oh yeah,
and
one of the main members had just an abundance of tomatoes, so we froze a bunch of that. But like people in that time, we don't know exactly what we're going to do until just before. Depends on what kind of meats we get donated. We'll do some domestic meat, chicken
We can ask for appeal right here, Tom, if somebody is out hunting or trapping, and anything from muskrats, beavers, all the way through.
Turkey, venison, any wild game that's.
And we have a wild game license for this, so we can do this. So it's.
In fact, it reminds me, I gotta send that in. That's good.
Do you send it in now, or is it just a
it's an electronic one, but actually I have somebody else do it for me because I'm not very electronic.
Right.
But
you're living up to your character.
Yes, I am. We're licensed by the DNR to have a dinner and to charge. We cannot take any migratory waterfowl because that's covered by the federal rules, and if we charge for the dinner, we can't serve migratory game birds because the federal won't allow it. So we can take anything that's non-migratory, so geese and ducks we can't do. But we've had venison, of course, and we've had rabbit, and we've had
Bear.
muskrat, beaver, bear, all kinds of that stuff.
Yeah.
And each year is different. We try to vary the menu, and then we'll do a bunch of the vegetable stuff. We have the homemade sauerkraut that we made at our harvest fair.
Or we should say more directly that probably the Giese family.
Yeah, Jim and his family and his buddies made that, but it turned out really good.
Yeah,
I sampled just a little when we were
yeah.
packaging it up. But that'll be a good one. And we try to vary the menu from year to year.
Now, you have at least, what, Tom, 2 domestic meats there?
2 domestic meats.
Chicken usually.
Chicken.
And this year you're probably going to do...
we're shooting for, like, roasted pork loin.
Okay.
We've had ham for a number of years, and we'd like to just change that up a little. Not that pork loin is that much different, other than the taste is different. But and we've got a really good crew of people that are some of them professional food people, chef, and those of us that worked in the food industry.
Yes.
So it's we work. Well, a little bit on Thursday and all day Friday and all day Saturday to get it all ready, and we cook everything there. I mean, it's as scratch as you can get.
Yeah, and it'll be at the Nakusa Community Center, and that's 4 to 8 p.m. We gather at 4, we eat about 5, and then we have meal and entertainment afterwards, and so it's done by 8. You're on your way home.
Yep.
Beautiful facility down there. You can't beat it. It's a great location for us. And also, since we're Nakusa oriented, it brings us back home. So that's kind of nice. We just don't do it at the site, folks, because we just don't have a facility for it. We can't. This one serves, like 120, 140 people somewhere in that area. And so at the site, if we could serve a dozen, maybe we'd be lucky probably at any building.
I was just thinking of the oven in the Wakely House stove compared to those 4 huge ovens that we have at the Nakusa Civic Center, or Senior Center, and even then we're scratching to get things done in order so that they can have it all done right at the right time.
Yeah.
There would, like you say, if you could feed a dozen people at the Wakely House,
that'd be a lot.
That's max.
Yeah. And the tickets will be available. They're $20 if you buy them from a member or something. And they'll be available in the next couple weeks, and $25 at the door. So if you get a chance, you want to come, get the tickets in advance, or call one of our places where we have them, Family Natural Foods or Beavers, Nakusa, something like that. Tickets will be out in, like I say, about 2 weeks' time. So the other thing, Tom, between Heritage Holiday and Winter Feast is, of course, ice cutting.
Oh, yes.
It's on the last Sunday of January, and we normally start 9 o'clock, and we have presents on the ice till probably 12:30, 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to come out and see that, we're part of the Port Edwards Lions Fishery. We're happy to be a part of that. It's out on Nepco Lake. Great facility there. They got a warming house if it's a cold day, and we've been doing this for probably 27, 28 years, and we remember days when it's so cold that, I remember cutting ice and did a lot of that, and, you get kind of warm, so you take your coat off and maybe just got a vest on or something. But on those cold days, if you quit cutting ice for much more than a couple minutes or so, you got to put a coat back on, because you got to keep the motion going so you can keep warm or something. And of course, we know cutting ice is a labor. I think it's as much friction as cutting. I don't know.
Well, no, Johan's got the teeth of those saws really pretty good nowadays.
Yeah.
But we really enjoy doing it. And then we use the ice in the summer at our festival. They make ice cream. They keep the soda cold, and it'll last until into August.
Yes.
I think the Wakeleys, if they'd have put it up and then been very judicious about how they repiled the sawdust and everything, I think they could have stretched it out, depending on the year, pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good. In fact, we'll be looking at it before Christmas, probably, of picking up the sawdust. We have to pick sawdust up to pack the ice in, and we get in some trailers. Now we've been talking about maybe putting the trailers in the pull shed we got, maybe storing some of it in there rather than having it out in the open, because sometimes it's a month early.
But our carpenters have got, you make a place and to store stuff, and you make it larger than you really need.
56
and then you
by
fill it up.
25 or 30 or whatever it was.
The guys have done a great job sorting lumber, and we've got some old lumber that we can use that's been salvaged. But all of a sudden, we were in there yesterday, and it's like, wait a minute, this is getting full.
Yeah, and that's not counting the skid steer in there.
No,
because
that's going to have to stay out of there if we put sawdust in there. But it's like I say, we were just looking yesterday that's a good problem to have.
Yes,
because we've got materials on site that we can use. We reuse it, and we don't have to spend cash to do it, and yet we can put out a good show for the public. I mean, I don't like to say it that way, but you know what I mean.
Well, it was kind of interesting. We just finished and dedicated the bunkhouse and Harvest Fair, and that building, other than the shingles on it and the square nails in it, I don't think there was any purchased lumber in that thing. I think that was all,
the frame around the bottom.
Frame around the bottom, the 8x8s or whatever.
Yeah, we had to buy those.
But the rest of it was all stuff that we had collected over the years, or we just milled it, or had somebody mill it for us, or people donated it to us, which is beautiful because, the building still probably costs $6,000 or $7,000, shingles and nails and different other odds and ends. But surprisingly, if you had to pay for all that different wood and everything, you'd look at twice that price.
And when you think of the amount of labor that was put into there, and we had people who are professional builders, or were in their working life professional builders, working with us and doing the technical parts of things. The rest of us, we did the.
Well, they show Tom and I where to put the nail and pound it in. We'll do that.
You bet. Other than that, I have no clue.
We were just talking about the chicken coop, as we're kind of explaining to Don or somebody, or I think it was Jim maybe, and how many times we made that cut, you and I and Carl.
Making rafters when you really don't know what you're doing is a challenge.
And then when we got finally the pitch and everything perfect, then we saved that because we had to have that.
We had to have that pattern because we'd have been lost.
I guess you can figure all this out on a square if you know what you're doing.
If you know what you're doing. but it was fun. I mean, I wouldn't have traded that 2 months for the world. But oh my goodness, and now we've got that bunkhouse. Mm-hmm. That's the nicest building that's out there right now. I mean, that's and it's very historic. There's 8 bunks in there, a couple tables, a bench for the guys to sit on. And when they came up to either work with the log rafts or the lumber rafts, or to work at Wakely's sawmill, and he had a small sawmill, but
and a shingle mill, that sort of thing.
mostly lath and shingles and other stuff. He didn't do lots and lots and lots of big lumber, but jeepers, I mean, it's pretty much historic. We've got an antique stove in there from the 1840s, and it's.
It turned out beautifully.
Yeah, it's a fun building, and now during our festivals and other things, when people come and stay over, we've got a place for some folks to be, especially if we get a rainy, wet.
Or if they
time.
don't have a tent or something like that.
Some of the demonstrators can stay in the bunkhouse, and we can actually use it for what it was for in the first place.
Yeah. So it's a great time. Again, we kind of digressed a little bit, but Heritage Holiday, Saturday, December 16th, 1 to 5 p.m. Invite you all out. Come on out and enjoy a great Christmas time with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you. Thank you.